All right, welcome back to the Suhu channel, everybody. Today we are talking about something that almost everyone experiences, but few people name clearly. Winter shows up, and suddenly your skincare routine just feels kind of off. Products that worked fine a few months ago are starting to sting. Your skin feels tighter, duller, or more reactive. And a lot of people respond by assuming their skin has changed or that they are doing something wrong. What we want to talk about today is why winter is when all this stuff starts to happen. It's why winter is when your skincare routine quietly fails. Not in a dramatic way, but in a slow, frustrating way that makes you feel like you can't have confidence in your own routine. The core idea here is simple. Winter is changing the environment that your skin is operating in. And if your routine isn't changing with it, that's where things are going to start to break down.
Yeah, totally. And, no matter where you live, like I live in Florida, so it's still, 80 degrees here, which is great. It's drier though, right? And I also think, in the winter, even if you're in like these warmer climates, maybe you're in air conditioning more, maybe you're flying on a plane more because of holiday travel. There's a lot of things that happen in the winter. People are getting sick, blowing their nose more, that's like affecting your skin too. So, yeah, I think kind of no matter where you live, like these subtle climate changes, these subtle changes in your day-to-day routine can totally affect how your skin is responding to the environment. And just like at its basic core, like if the air is cooler or the air is drier, you're going to have lower humidity in the air, and that lower moisture content in the air is really going to pull water out of your skin. And as that water is getting pulled out, it's basically evaporating. And so your skin is getting drier. And so that's why we often find our skin to be a little drier in the winter. And then, you know, sometimes we compensate for that in different ways. And I think we're going to talk about that a little bit today. But really, like the main thing here is to be responsive to your skin type and to be proactive, right? So we don't really need anything too fancy to fix these things that arise during the winter. We just need to be proactive about it before things get really bad and you have your skin cracking or you feel pain when you're putting lotion on and things like that.
Yeah, I think one thing you mentioned that I want to highlight is what's actually changing in winter. So, like right away, I think one thing that's important to name is that winter is not just colder. As you said, it's drier. When you turn on your indoor heating, that's going to lower the humidity. Cold air holds less moisture. Hot showers strip oils faster, and all of that changes how your skin behaves. So when people say their skin suddenly feels dry or sensitive, what they're really describing is skin under more environmental stress. That does not mean that their skin type changed. It means their skin just needs more support. So Lydia, I would love it if you could explain what is actually happening at the skin level here, because this is where a lot of the misconceptions start.
Yeah. And it's really interesting, right? Like your skin, you can just think of, right, as like cells being kind of held together in like a matrix of lipids, essentially. And when we're thinking about the skin barrier in particular, there are different features of this barrier that change in cold weather. And so York kind of brought up one with central heating and cooler air, basically drying out your skin through osmosis. Basically, you can just think the humidity in the air decreases. And so to compensate for that, the air starts to pull water out of your skin. And that's called something fancy, just transepidermal water loss. But this is one of the main reasons why your skin dries out. But then there's also some other weird effects that like people don't necessarily think about, which is your skin barrier has lipids in it. And you can think of lipids as being kind of an oily substance. And if you think about how an oil changes in different temperatures, you can start to apply this to your skin a little bit too. So an oil is typically really lubricating when it's hot, right? Like you can think about coconut oil is actually a really good example of this. In warm weather, it's very, you know, oily. It's not cloudy. It's something that you can easily pour. It's not very viscous. And as you start to lower the temperature of the coconut oil, things start to get more viscous. You start to see it become cloudy, and eventually it becomes almost like a butter, right? In like the cans that you can buy coconut butter, coconut oil in, right? And so you can think of lipids, they don't all fall on the same spectrum. So the temperature changes are different for each one, right? But like you can think about as the weather becomes colder, your lipids do start to change a little bit. And one of the reasons why you can start to get these like micro cracks in your skin is because your lipids begin to literally freeze in the cold weather. And so this creates, instead of having a really flexible skin barrier that can move really easily, this creates a mechanically inflexible or rigid skin barrier, and that starts to create cracks. So that's something that I think people don't necessarily think about is like the origin of why we start to get cracked skin. And then another thing that we've talked about in a podcast, I think maybe it was the first podcast or second podcast, but we've talked a lot about how it's super important to have really good circulation to deliver nutrients to your skin. And in particular, we were talking about scalp, but this applies to your whole body, right? Like our skin is this huge organ. It requires all these different nutrients, it requires energy, and all of that gets to the skin through blood. And in the cold weather, our blood vessels start to vasoconstrict. And so we are also reducing the number of nutrients that are getting to our skin cells if we are constantly in the cold. And then finally, this one's also a little weird to think about, but your skin has different pH ranges. And in general, your skin is a little acidic. Like we're not talking very acidic. If water is a pH of 7.4, which is like right down the middle, our skin is like closer to 5. And like 4.5 to 5.5. Really 5.5 is healthy skin. And then you get some different ranges depending on where you are in the body. But these particular pHs help different species of bacteria live in harmony on our body. And as we start to have water loss and these other problems, our pH can shift to be more alkaline or more basic. And when that happens, we start to see shifts in our microbiome. And those shifts in our microbiome can contribute to infections and other irritation as well. Those are some of the main ways that environmental changes affect us, especially in cold, dry weather.
Yeah, that's really interesting. When I think about winter, I'm like, oh, it's just getting a little bit colder, but the colder air has a lot of cascading effects. So you're saying the moisture in the air reduces, so that osmosis is pulling water out of your body, and your actual skin is becoming less flexible, your circulation is decreasing, and can even affect your pH. So then this is where I think routines are quietly failing. Most people are just using the same routine that they have in the summer and the fall, same cleanser, same actives, same frequency, but the conditions have changed. So when the skin barrier is under more stress, products that were once fine can suddenly feel irritating. The cleansers feel harsher, the actives feel stronger, exfoliation takes longer to recover from. A lot of people interpret that as the product not working anymore. So they add more products or switch things quickly, acting reactively. But very often, the issue is not the product, it's the timing and the environment. So, Lydia, maybe we can zoom in here and talk about why routines stop working when the weather changes.
Yeah, you're right. And I feel like, we've all had the painful experience of like going outside, skin's really dry, or this happens to me a lot in hotels because hotels tend to be really dry for me, but I'll go to put my regular lotion on and it will be like burning my face. Like I'll feel the burn and I'll be like, "Ooh, that doesn't feel very good, right?" And what that means is I've just unfortunately reached the point where I'm kind of responding in a reactive way, right? Like I have my skin dry out and now my product that normally works for me is, causing some pain. And this doesn't necessarily mean like that's now the wrong product for me, but what I like to think about is how can I adjust my routine in those types of spaces to be a little bit more proactive? And this is like, there's the basics that we can kind of teach for everybody that applies to everybody. But, depending on what your job is, depending on what you're doing during the day, you may need to be on the more extreme end of protective than other people. And the example that I was thinking about today was just like I have a cousin who does like construction work outside and like right? And like that in the winter, the level of protection that you need on your skin is like drastically greater, right? Than if you are working inside, maybe like at an office job. But the basics are still the same. And so like one of the things you can think about is we've already kind of in the winter like shifted to this more vulnerable state of our skin. And if we are in the state where it's already a little bit dry, it's already cracking a little bit, then when we put actives on it, like if you put your retinol on it that you normally would use at night, if you use like a glycolic acid cleanser for your face, which can be a really nice way to cleanse your face, if you're using that on top of the dryness, it's going to cause more pain and often it's going to further compromise your skin. And there's a few reasons why that's happening. One is simply that if you've already caused some sort of damage to your skin just from the environment, you often will have some sort of inflammation or immune response that's happening at a low level in those areas. Cracked skin, for example, is a entry point in your skin now for pollutants and fragrances and things like get in and cause further damage. So you might have some inflammation there from your immune response acting on it. And so if you add additional actives on top of that, your body is not going to be responding in its typical way, which is, synergistically with the active. It's now going to treat it as, additional pollutant and additional damaging agent. So you just want to be a little careful when you do reach the point where your skin is dry or cracked, like that you're not, putting a full skincare routine with all of your actives on it until you kind of heal the underlying issue. And then additionally, like depending on what you're doing during the day, you may need to add to your routine. You may need we'll talk about, I think in a little bit, maybe about like what occlusives are and things like that. But like if you're going outside and you're going to ski, it's like you're gonna want sunscreen and you're also gonna want like some shea butter, some kind of really thick seal to really like hold in the moisture. And like that type of adjustment to your routine doesn't need to necessarily happen in the summer or in all situations, but like, yeah, you're going to be outside for a while. It's important to do that kind of thing. And then my key thing here is really just like monitor your skin intuitively, right? Like if I know that when I travel, my skin gets really dry, maybe I put some of that shea butter on before I get on the plane. I put it on before I go to the hotel room, whatever I need to do to kind of protect against that dryness. And then I was kind of curious. I was just like looking on kind of through my own research and then also online just to find some fun examples of like what's good for your skin in the winter and what's not so good. One of the things that people generally say is like if you're going to do a cleanser in the winter and your skin tends to get dry, try to go for a cleanser that's like an oil cleanser or a balm cleanser and stay away from the harsher foaming gel cleansers, the more water-based cleansers. Those surfactants in the more like soapy cleansers are going to strip away the oils on your skin, whereas like the oils and the balms are going to replenish them. And then if you're going for exfoliation, like if you're doing your normal exfoliation, just like check to see what level of harshness it is. If we're using glycolic acid, that's a little harsher than using like a rice enzyme wash, for example. So I use like a rice bran enzyme wash. It's like in a little powder, and that's lightly exfoliating, but it's very gentle. If you are using scrubs, just be aware that like a sugar scrub or something like that has little beads in it. So if you already have those micro tears or your skin's already inflexible, those could be doing mechanical damage to your skin. And then this one's the hardest for me, but if you're gonna take a shower, try to take a lukewarm shower and not a steaming hot shower. That just helps keep the oils, the natural oils on your skin a little bit more healthy. If you're taking a super hot shower, it can strip those away. So if you're like me and you do like warm showers, try to go for lukewarm. Dial it down a little bit, especially if you're just coming inside from like skiing or just coming inside from like shopping or whatever you're doing outside. You want to not go from this super cold environment to this super hot environment either. So yeah, those are kind of like some of the key ways you can, start to work with your skin during the winter. And yeah, I'm curious and think York, maybe if you can kind of go into some of the common mistakes that people make, that might also be helpful for people to hear too.
Totally, yeah. Just to piggyback off of what you were saying, the hot shower one, that is definitely my biggest challenge in the winter as well. I think that is a common challenge for folks in the winter and a
Yeah.
common mistake. Which it can be tough when it's really cold outside. You want to feel all that nice hot water all over your body. But like you were saying, that actually does work to strip lipids, and those lipids act to protect your moisture and hydration in your skin in the winter. So that would be the biggest one, I think, is the hot showers. Over cleansing, over exfoliating, those are also going to damage your skin barrier. Um, and relying too heavily on aggressive actives in the winter when your skin is already struggling, that's going to present challenges as well. But I think if you remember, I think the key for a lot of the blog posts and podcasts coming out in this winter is that everything really does start with your skin barrier. If you think of your skin as a system and you think of your skin barrier as a part of that system being affected by the actions that you're taking every day, is be it skiing or working outside, and being affected by the environment as well. If it's colder outside, if the humidity is fallen, etc. If you're thinking about your skin in the context of all of these other things, you're gonna have an easier time keeping your skincare routine effective in the winter.
Yeah, for sure. When you're building a basic routine for the winter, a lot of people rely very heavily on lotion, and um, lotion is great for hydrating, but if your skin barrier is already dehydrated or cracked, you can kind of think about lotion as being similar to pouring water into a bucket with holes in it. And so what you really, really want to do is you want to make sure that, whatever lotion product you're using also either in its ingredients contains some sort of seal for your skin. And we'll talk about like what those types of ingredients are, or you want to use some sort of oil over the lotion to really seal the water in your skin.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned about chasing hydration without thinking about moisture is really important. You can add as many water-based products as you want, but if you're not supporting the barrier with products that are going to keep that water in, then you haven't really done as much as you think you have. And one of the biggest mindset shifts that we're talking about this winter is barrier first thinking. So instead of asking, how do I fix this problem? The question becomes, how do I support my skin so it can regulate itself again? That often means doing less, not more, especially in the winter. That means fewer actives, gentler cleansing, giving the skin time to recover. From a values perspective, I really like this approach because it aligns with intentional care. You are not constantly buying new things. You're just adjusting how you're using what you already have. It also reframes skincare as support rather than control. So, Lydia, we've been talking a lot about supporting the skin barrier. Can we take a moment to zoom in? Like, what is our skin barrier?
Yeah, I'm glad we're going to talk about this because most people, I think, you see your skin every day, but we're not thinking about it at a micro level. Like, what do you see when you actually go down to not just the cellular level, but the protein level, and also even further down to the molecular level? And so, this skin barrier, right, is the stratum corneum. It's the outer layer of the epidermis. And it's really mainly functioning to shield against environmental damage. You can think the sun, dirt, pollutants, chemical damage, things like that. But then it also, more in line with what we're talking about today, is responsible for trapping in all the things that you want in your skin. So it's this barrier between the inside and the outside, holding in the good things, blocking the bad things. And we can think about these sort of core components as being these corneocytes, which are these flattened, dead skin cells that have been stacked on top of each other in layers. And that creates like a physical hard structure on the outside of your skin and really contributes to that shield protective functionality. And then inside those cells, there are these natural moisturizing factors, which is really just a mix of amino acids, urea, lactate. These are all essentially molecules. They're molecules, but they act as sort of these molecular sponges, and they really hold water in inside those corneocytes. And then sticking all of those flattened dead skin cells together is a lipid matrix. And this is what we were kind of referring to a few times previously in this podcast, is these kind of oil-based lipid matrix, this sort of oily, waxy substance that acts as a glue to really seal everything together. And it also creates this waterproof seal that prevents water from leaving. We talked about that transepidermal water loss. Well, if you have this beautiful lipid matrix intact, you shouldn't be losing water. And then also, and you can think of like the composition of this like lipid matrix as being composed of ceramides, which you've probably seen in like skincare ingredients before, cholesterol, we've definitely heard of that, as well as free fatty acids. And all of these things sort of combine to create this beautiful matrix. And then there are a few other components as well that I will get into just a little bit, but we're not going to talk about them too much after. As Margaret kind of talked about that acid nature to the skin, acidic nature to the skin. There is like an acid mantle, and that's like a very fine, slightly acidic film on the surface of the skin. And often that's composed by like the sebum and the sweat and salts. And that creates a pH of like 4.5 to 5.5 on the skin and inhibits the growth of that harmful bacteria. And then there are a few other features, but those are the key ones that I think are important for our conversation. And so when you're thinking about, okay, we have this stratum corneum, this skin barrier that we want to maintain. Now, when you're looking at products, you can start to understand the different components of the different types of lotions and butters and oils and things. So one of the main things you can think about when you're putting a lotion on is it'll probably have some kind of humectant in it, and that's a water magnet. Basically, it's a molecule that really attracts water out from the air and pulls it into the skin. That's super important for just being able to hydrate the skin, right? And those occlusives are very hydrophobic, meaning they repel water. They create a film over the skin and they physically block the water from evaporating. And in the winter, when we think of like really strong occlusives, that would be like your Vaseline, right? Or your shea butter. And so if you're like that construction worker that we were talking about earlier, like you're putting a lot of like Vaseline, shea butter, these things that are like so powerfully occlusive that no water is getting in or out. Beeswax is another good example. And then there's like these other ingredients that you see sometimes. There's ceramides, which we know are a component of the lipid matrix, and ceramides exist as an ingredient. People put those in skincare to help basically like add them back into your matrix. And then the other things is people put other types of lipid molecules back into the matrix too. And you can think of that as being like different naturally occurring lipid molecules, for example, found in jojoba oil or argan oil or rosehip oil. Those are all very beautiful collections of these lipids that mimic the ones already formed naturally in your skin. So jojoba oil is great to use as well in the winter as sort of an oil-based support for your skin barrier. And really the key here is this creating like a sequence in your routine that really benefits your skin for what you're doing. So for me, I like to use a lotion followed by an oil. And if I'm going outside, I may add like shea butter or Vaseline, depending on what's happening, if I'm skiing or if I'm just walking outside. But really like that lotion to hydrate, the oil to sort of seal and protect, and then any additional sealant that you may need for whatever activities you're doing. And that really kind of covers it for like the basics of the routine. And you just need to kind of figure out what brands you like and what products you like to solve that problem for you.
I love the brick and mortar model description of your skin barrier. So you have this defensive wall between your organs and your environment. If you want to bring some water, bring some hydration in, you need to use these humectants. Occlusives are going to seal that water, make it stick, and then you can actually make that barrier more flexible with these ceramides. And that sequencing, I think, is also really important. So that's a really great summation of what your skin barrier actually is and what these products can actually do to help you. So if someone is listening right now and they're thinking, my routine feels off, the takeaway here is not to completely overhaul your routine. It's to slow down, reduce the intensity, pay attention to how your skin is feeling day to day, and adjust the frequency of what you're doing before you're adding steps. Seasonal skincare is not about starting over. It's about responding to these real environmental changes because your skin is an adaptive organ. It just needs the right conditions to thrive. So to wrap this up, the big idea is that winter skincare failure is quiet. It shows up as tightness, irritation, dullness, and frustration. And the solution is rarely more intensity. It is more support. Healthy skin in winter comes from respecting the environment your skin is in and adjusting accordingly.
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest key takeaway for me is really being proactive versus reactive, listening to and knowing what your skin does in different environments and predicting that and using the right products to proactively take care of it will take you really far. And at the basics, really, you're just looking at a lotion that hydrates, followed by some sort of occlusive that seals in that moisture. And that can be an oil-based product. It can also be something, more even, at the far end of occlusivity, like Vaseline and shea butter, like really locking in that moisture in extreme environments. Yeah, but other than that, like you can keep it pretty basic and keep your skin healthy in the winter.
Sweet. Well, thank you, Lydia, for your expertise. If you, the listener, want to go any deeper, we wrote a full blog post on why winter is when skincare routines quietly fail, and it expands on everything that we've talked about today. As always, we would love your questions, leaving them in the comments, and subscribe for more science forward conversations. We will see you next week. Adios.
Bye.